That's Lexi Hall, Sophie Cunningham, everybody else. I don't know. They looking spooky because we know we gonna possibly keep Kelsey Mitchell. And we got KK on the team. We got Leah Boston on the team. And we got none other than the Shigoat, Caitlin Clark. We only need a couple more pieces. And if they could skip free agency and just draft players and develop them, y'all understand how scary good this is about to be. And I ain't talking no run-of-the-mill players. I'm talking big program players that perform on very, very high levels. Big program players that's making their...
The Indiana Fever are sitting roughly 5 days away from one of the most important draft nights in recent franchise history, and the names already being connected to the team suggest something significant could be taking shape. A Sports Illustrated report dropped detailing 4 college seniors who would slot in perfectly alongside Caitlin Clark, and if Indiana plays this right, they may not even need to wade deep into free agency to get the supporting pieces they need. The current core already has something to build on. Clark is the foundation. Kelsey Mitchell brings shooting and scoring punch from the backcourt.
Program players that perform on very, very high levels. Big program players that's making their way to potentially winning a national title. Let's dive into this article, man. This article was released by Sports Illustrated this morning. Now, this article right here is very, very profound because it gives great detail on, I think, some players that could come in and make what? Immediate impact. Let's dive into it, man. 4 final players who would make perfect sense next to Caitlin Clark. Keep an eye on these seniors. Yes.
Aaliyah Boston anchors the front court. Lexi Hull and Sophie Cunningham give the team reliable wing options. But the depth has not been deep enough to push this group all the way to a championship, and that is exactly what these draft additions could fix. The idea of grabbing proven talent straight out of high-level college programs and developing them rather than chasing veterans in free agency makes a lot of sense for a team trending upward. First player on the list from the report is Gabrielle Jaquez out of UCLA.
So, let's read this real quick, man. It says, it's finally April, which means women basketball fans have one big thing happening after another. The expansion draft for the Tempo and Fire will take place Friday, April the 3rd. That's what I'm thinking about. I had my dates mixed up because the draft is on the 13th. Now, that same day, UConn and South Carolina and UCLA and Texas will battle it out in the Final Four. WNBA free agency starts when? April 12th, and the draft will take place the very...
Teams built around a primary ball handler who draws constant defensive attention always need wings who can guard multiple spots, compete on the glass, and knock down open perimeter shots. Jaquez checks all of those boxes. She has put together a strong run for the Bruins this season, posting 13.5 points, 5.4 rebounds, 2 assists, and 1.2 steals per game while shooting 54% from the floor and 39% from 3. Beyond the numbers, she carries the ability to manufacture her own offense, something Indiana's second unit has been lacking. A player who can come off the bench and score double digits without needing a play called for her solves a real problem.
Very next day! So you know what that means, right? So you know what that means. For Fever fans, there's a lot to think about. Who will the Tempo and Fire snag in the first expansion draft? Who can the Fever add in free agency? Who will be their first round pick? Now, they listed Gabrielle Jaquez out of UCLA, man. With the guard like Caitlin Clark, you can never have enough big wings.
The second UCLA name in the piece is Gianna Kuiper, who the report positions as the top pure shooter in this draft class behind Azzi Fudd. Connecting on 42% of her 5.3 three-point attempts per game while holding her own defensively makes her exactly the kind of player Clark would benefit from having around. Clark's entire game is built on pulling coverage toward herself and finding open teammates. A shooter who converts at that rate is a natural fit. Availability at Indiana's pick spot remains the only real concern. Raven Johnson out of South Carolina is the name that carries the most weight in the entire report.
Who can defend multiple positions, crash the boards, and drain three-pointers. Now, we know how much the Indiana Fever love three-point shooters. Caitlin Clark definitely loved three-point shooters. And let's say potentially, allegedly, food for thought, Kelsey Mitchell do leave. We will have to get another three-point shooter to kind of fill that void. Now, the article goes on to say Gabrielle Jaquez has been just that for the Bruins during their almost flawless run back to the Final Four. The senior is currently averaging 13.5.
No prospect has pushed her value higher over the course of this season. She essentially doubled her scoring output compared to last year, while never losing the defensive edge that already had people paying attention. She also guided South Carolina back to the Final Four, reinforcing that she performs when the pressure is at its peak. The article makes the case clearly if Johnson is still on the board when Indiana picks, passing on her would be a costly mistake. She can run the second unit behind Clark, bring an aggressive defensive presence to the backcourt, and add toughness to the Clark-Mitchell pairing.
0.5 points, 5.4 rebounds, 2 assists, and 1.2 steals per game, while shooting 54% from the field and 39% from three. This young lady right here is a productive player and someone I feel like that can go out there and get her own buckets. Long as she get the ball in her hand, she know how to put it in a round circle. And this is somebody that I think that could come in maybe off the bench and get you maybe 10, get you maybe 6.
Indiana should also not forget that Johnson held Clark to 7 points on 3 of 11 shooting in the national title game 2 years ago. Dawn Staley's system deserves some of that credit, but Johnson's individual defense was relentless throughout that game, physical, active, and constantly disrupting Clark's rhythm. Letting another franchise take her would be a problem. The fourth player is Medina Adara, also from South Carolina. Indiana's frontcourt situation is solid at the starting level with Boston, but the backup options behind her have a limited ceiling.
Maybe Sam Mate. You know, this is something that the Fever been missing a little bit. Somebody that could come in off the bench and get their own buckets, man. Let's go to the next one. Who did they have next? They got, I'm going to just say Gianna Naperson, another UCLA player. Now, speaking of three-point shooting and the UCLA Bruins, let's just say GK is the best shooter in the draft after Ozzie Fudd. She sinks 42% of her 5-point.
Adara brings the size and energy needed to fill that gap over the long run. She is currently averaging a double-double, 13.2 points and 10 rebounds per game, and her ability to run the floor and finish near the basket would add a dimension Indiana does not currently have coming off the bench. A player who can relieve Boston, stay active on the glass, and threaten at the rim changes how opposing defenses have to prepare. Free agency opens April 12th with the draft following the very next day on April 13th. Indiana does not have to overpay in a crowded market to improve this team.
5.3 attempts per game is good in the mid-range and provides solid defense. That's just what the Fever want next to Caitlin Clark, who can get the ball to any open shooter. Now, these players, especially her, she's a very, very good defensive player. I don't know if the Fever will have her available when they draft pick come around. I don't know the exact number that the Fever has.
The talent is sitting right there in the draft, and if the front office identifies these players correctly, this franchise could be making a serious move toward the top of the league in the very near future. What is unfolding with the Chicago Sky front office is not a single bad call. It is a pattern of reinforcing previous errors rather than correcting them, which is a considerably more serious problem. To be fair about last season, most of the decisions that backfired on Chicago carried reasonable logic when they were made. Bringing Courtney Sloot back made structural sense. She tore her ACL just a handful of games into the year, and the team genuinely needed a true point guard to operate alongside their two bigs. Virtually nobody had that outcome on their radar when the signing happened.
What's it? Hailey Van Lith. And is Hailey Van Lith worth... It comes out, realistically, is Hailey Van Lith worth going, not dropping 4 spots in the second round and the 26th pick? My opinion, no. No. Like, at the 26th pick, I did my mock draft, and I predicted Ashlon Jackson to go there. And Ashlon Jackson is, in my opinion, at least the idea of Ashlon Jackson is...
The Ariel Atkins acquisition was similarly defensible at the time. Chicago was widely projected as a playoff contender. Beck Allen was viewed as a strong addition. Aisha Siva came in with real expectations attached, even if she ended up having a quieter season than anticipated. These were calculated bets made without the benefit of knowing how the year would unfold.
Ashlon Jackson is better than what we know of Hailey Van Lith. And it seems like Chicago Sky are like basically just adamant on bringing back HVL. And that's the thing where it's like, I don't think HVL is going to improve. And if HVL does kill it somewhere else, so be it. So be it. Like, make your pick with a second round pick. Take who you take. You've got them on a better contract anyway. And they're still going to be on a rookie minimum.
The Sky went into 2025 with many observers predicting them to finish 5th or 6th, the playoff team on paper. Ending up at 10-34 was not the predicted outcome for anyone paying attention. That context matters. What does not hold up under the same defense is the current off-season approach, which involves doubling down on those same decisions now that the results are fully visible. The Hailey Van Lith situation sits at the middle of this.
But at the same time, like, HVL is not even on a rookie minimum. She's going to cost more. She was the 10th or 11th pick. Yeah, I think they picked Van Lith before Sivka. Like, bringing in Aisha Sivka is not going to instantly make the Sky a good team. It's just not. So, like, what other players are they bringing in? Clearly, they want to core Ariel Atkins. Like, if they're protecting her, the implication is you're going to core her. So they're probably going to core Ariel Atkins.
She was not a shocking selection when Chicago took her projections, had her going in roughly the range she landed, and the case for her as a scorer off the ball was not unreasonable. The actual problem is fit. Van Lith is not a natural point guard, and the Sky's system has never been structured in a way that maximizes what she brings. An expansion environment less defined, more open, built for players finding their footing would arguably suit her far better than continuing in Chicago. Portland or Toronto selecting her in the expansion draft would have resolved a problematic situation at no cost to Chicago.
You're going to core her. So they're probably going to core Ariel Atkins. You're probably going to then, obviously, I don't even know if they keep Angel Reese. Like, they're running it. They were last place last year. And I understand they were technically second last in the standings. Okay, on a technicality that they had the head-to-head over... They won the head-to-head over Dallas. So on a technicality, they weren't last. But they won 10 games. They went 10-34 last year. The Chicago Sky are running it back with a team that went 10-34.
Instead, the organization spent second-round picks to ensure exactly that did not happen. Those picks represent real opportunity cost. The 26th selection in the second round, for example, is precisely where prospects like Ashawn Jackson project to land in current mock drafts. Jackson represents genuine upside, a player whose potential ceiling may exceed what Van Lith has shown so far in a system that has never fit her.
Chicago Sky are running it back with a team that went 10-34 without their draft pick. They don't have their draft pick. It's as simple as that. They don't have their pick. If they had their pick, okay, yeah, maybe we're talking about this differently. If they were running it back and they're like, look, we're high on Hailey Van Lith and... like, we're happy. We actually think we're better than we showed last season. But, like, based on what? They beat the Lynx when, in a game where, in fairness, Angel and Camilla were unbelievable. And they beat the Liberty last year in a game.
Beyond Jackson specifically, that range of the draft includes Hannah Stokey as a bench option, Shaw Jesse as a scoring wing, Marta Suarez as a possibility, and a Vanderbilt prospect who has attracted attention. There were usable players available at those spots. Surrendering access to them in order to retain someone who has already demonstrated she does not mesh with the roster is difficult to explain as anything other than institutional stubbornness. The Ariel Atkins dimension adds another layer.
Last year, in a game where the Liberty just, I don't know what the Liberty did in that game. They beat the Sparks a few times, I guess. Like, in fairness to the Sky, they did okay against some of the bad teams. Like, did they lose to the... Am I right in saying they lost to the Sun and Tyler Marsh got himself chucked? I could be wrong with that. But, like, I can't really remember the Sky's games last year, other than the Minnesota Lynx one. And remember their wins. I remember some of their L's.
Protecting her from the expansion draft carries a clear implication the organization intends to offer her a designated player contract. The honest evaluation of that decision is uncomfortable. Atkins was legitimately excellent during her time in Washington, particularly in high-stakes moments. She was one of the better defensive guards in the league for an extended stretch.
And remember their wins. I remember some of their L's. I remember they had a really, really bad loss against the Mercury at one stage. They lost to the Mercury when they were up like 17 points. And the Basically, I thought they were throwing the game. They put five. They put four undrafted rookies and Kit Laxa, who was a 29-year-old rookie, on the floor at the same time. And I'm like, they're throwing this game, and suddenly that team brought it back. But like, they are running it back with a terrible team, and they don't have their own pick.
But her defensive output declined noticeably last season in Chicago, and her scoring numbers, while consistent, reflect a player operating around the level of the 8th best shooting guard in the league. The argument for committing max money to that profile is weak, especially when the Atkins trade itself has not aged well. Sonia Citron, the player Washington received in return, is now performing at a comparable level to Atkins, and she is significantly younger, on a fraction of the salary, with a longer runway ahead of her. The pick swap included in that deal made it worse.
But like, they are running it back with a terrible team, and they don't have their own pick. Are they ironically, are they tanking for Sarah Strong? Like, that has to be it. But then, if you're going to do that, there's no point coring Ariel Atkins. There's actually not. There's no point coring Ariel Atkins if you're tanking for Sarah Strong, because you're trying to stink. Like, there's actually no point to this. So the Chicago Sky they're just terrible. They can't even tank properly. I still cannot believe.
At the time, reasonable people split on whether Chicago got fair value. Some thought the Sky were fleeced. Others thought Atkins for the 3rd pick was acceptable. What is no longer debatable is how it has played out, and what is hard to justify is behaving as though that outcome has not occurred. There is also a strategic contradiction embedded in all of this.